Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Perils in Paradise full set review. We're going to be doing class by class as always, but I haven't really dove into doing reviews of any of the cards so far. I've just kind of been busy with a lot of stuff going on. So we're just going to do it all at once. This is my typical sort of format for my reviews, is going class by class, card by card, and talking about them individually all at once they've all been reviewed, or rather been revealed. I am in a position where I actually haven't looked at that many of the reveals because I have been so busy. So we're going to be seeing some of these cards for the first time as I'm taking a look. I do want to give kind of a general thought on some of the mechanics in Perils in Paradise to begin with. The big one, I think, being the tourist mechanic. The tourist mechanic is that there are individual legendary cards in each of the classes that allow you to include a card from another specific class in deck building. And that is probably one of my favorite mechanics that we've seen in Hearthstone in a very long time. I've talked about this quite a bit when people ask me for my thoughts, sort of comparing Hearthstone and Magic, and they ask me, what are your thoughts on each of them? And the singular thing that I enjoy the most about Magic compared to Hearthstone is deck building. I think that the deck building process in Magic the Gathering is much more interesting than that of Hearthstone because of the just options you have, right? In Hearthstone, you play a class, and those are the cards you can play. Those are neutral cards, and that's it, right? There's no like, hey, I can play any individual card with any individual other card in Magic, which I think opens up a lot of really, really fascinating possible deck building combinations. And there's opportunity costs with the way that mana works in Magic, and that has its pros and cons, obviously. But it just gives you more sort of things to dream about doing, right? And the tourist mechanic in Perils in Paradise gives you some of that, right? Having a a druid card with warrior tourist can let you play Odin in your druid deck, right? And that's wildly interesting in terms of like what that looks like from, hey, from a deck building perspective, like what is it like when you can ramp into Odin? What is it like when you have all these ultra efficient armor gain cards in druid that you can combine with this powerful way to actually use them to end the game? So I think it is fascinating as a mechanic, and I'm really interested in exploring it. It's obviously not nearly as open ended as the deck building mechanics of Magic the Gathering, but it is sort of one step in that direction that creates really, really interesting deck building possibilities, and that is one of my favorite things about collectible card games, and a huge part of the reason I play. So, super, super excited. Oh, people in chat right now are saying it's limited to the current set. What? It's so much less interesting. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's literally just. Let me look it up because I thought it was just any card. Hearthstone mechanic. Is it literally just a Perils in Paradise card? It is only a Perils in Paradise card. Oh, well, that's so much less exciting. I mean, I get from a development standpoint why you might do that because it gives you less constraints of like, hey, what happens if you do put this card from another class in your deck or whatever. But yeah, and it's also it was backwards in terms of what had Druid Taurus versus Warrior Taurus. They're flipped. The Warrior has the Druid Taurus. But yeah, I'm so much less excited now. But it is still exciting. There's still cool, flexible stuff. But it's basically like you just get to kind of pick a few cards in that expansion that are basically dual class cards, which is much less cool. So I kind of wish it was the other way, but I understand why it might be that way. But meh, meh. Talk about taking the wind out of my sails. It's like I was like kite surfing and then just anyway. I'm glad I know that now and not as I'm talking about each individual card and getting it all wrong all the time. But now I guess we all know how Taurus works. Thank you, Twitch chat. So yeah, you can use a Taurus card to get a card from that set, specifically from Perils in Paradise. So yeah, and you can't use a Taurus card to get another Taurus card, which makes sense. But yeah, huh? That is less exciting than I initially thought, but it is still much more open-ended deck building wise than Hearthstone has been previously. So there's still that. Anyway, let's actually get into the cards. So we are starting with boom, Death Knight. One of the major mechanics here, or rather major themes of this set, is pirates. This is an undead pirate. The pirates, I guess, are Marin's band that went and opened the resort, Perils in Paradise. I guess I do want to say another comment about like I think it's a little bit weird that we've just seen kind of these like wacky like happy kind of expansions like back to back like so much in Hearthstone recently. I would prefer we have more of sort of the March of the Lich King, more like serious ish stuff at least, rather than just like here we're going on vacation, we go into the toy shop. Like it just feels a little I don't know, less like Warcraft to me. And I guess there is some intention of sort of moving Hearthstone from being Heroes of Warcraft to its kind of own thing. But it does feel a little goofy to me that we have so many just like very very light themed expansions. But regardless, Brittlebone Buccaneer. 2 costs 1/4. Whenever you play a Death Rattle minion, give it Reborn. So this is a pretty difficult minion to kill. At 2 costs 1/4, we've seen that stat line a number of times on minions that you want to play and have stick around. This is a very powerful effect with lots and lots of various Death Rattle minions. This with say the I'm losing the name of it, but the Death Rattle minion that gives your undead +2/+2 in your hand. It has miniaturize. That in a deck with this, this is undead synergizes automatically. This being alongside like really like any Death Rattle minion, right? Like you can use this in the sort of early game to get like tempo from like minions that have death rattles that generate additional minions in the late game from things that have ways to generate like value or huge board presence, again like the death rattle puppeteer thing. Reska, obviously you can use this alongside things like the Yelling Yodeler. There's just so many things that I think this is actually quite a powerful card that it can synergize with. So I do think this card has quite a bit of potential. It being specifically in undead makes a lot of sense. That's the rune that certainly lends itself most to Death Rattle minions. So this is a card that I definitely think will see a meaningful amount of play. Next up, Buttons. 5 cost 5/5 with Shaman Tourist. Battlecry, draw a spell of each spell school. Now that we know that Taurus only allows you to use cards from the particular expansion, um, one of the shaman mechanics in this expansion is sort of related to spell schools and stuff, so this does make sense. But one of the interesting things, normally this effect in Death Knight would get like basically like Frost, Unholy, and adding Shaman in, you can get like maybe you add a nature spell to your deck with the Tourist effect. So this I think that the ability to get like some sort of powerful spell that you can basically guarantee you're drawing with Buttons is an interesting sort of element of the Tourist effect here. You could potentially get another of the individual powerful non-spell cards in Shaman, but again, now that we know how the mechanic works, and you can't just go ahead and get like say a Shaman hero card or something if one is printed in the future, certainly makes it more likely that you're specifically going to aim to use this with the specific spell school synergy and get things that exist in Shaman that don't exist in Death Knight. Next up we have Eliza Goreblade, a 4 cost 4/3 with Death Rattle for the rest of the game. Your minions have +1 attack. This card is weird, right? Because this card being specifically Frost Blood, like I get that you're like, hey, this effect maybe is too powerful in a like heavy unholy deck, but it also feels like such an unholy mechanic, right? That it's weird that this isn't an unholy card. This card feels so similar to wanting to be unholy, right? That it's strange that the card doesn't have it. And again, from like a like balance perspective standpoint, it's like, okay, I guess. But it is only two pips, right? Blood plus Frost. You could use it with that first card that we saw. This dude, the Brittlebone Buccaneer. Give your Eliza Goreblade Reborn things that can multiple trigger it. Notably, this isn't like the like minions you control, minions in your hand, minions in your deck. This affects your hero power, right? So the fact that you can like if you multi-trigger this, you're like sending 2, 3, 4 power charged minions with your hero power is quite strong. So yeah, again, it feels strange to me that this is a Blood Frost card rather than being an Unholy card just because of its effect. But like from a like balance perspective, I get how they might want to avoid it being available with the double unholy, triple unholy cards. Um, it is a little weird to me that we have seen so much push away from any kind of triple rune decks, and so much is just kind of an amalgamation of like rainbow decks now, rather than rainbow being like, hey, you have to give up on these other powerful cards, but we just sort of see everything with single runes, which I think kind of loses some of the point of the rune system in the first place. I do think there was sort of initially when the runes when Death Knight came out, the rune system pushed people too much toward triple, and now I think it pushes them too much toward rainbow. And I wish we'd see, you know, like this, if this were like a triple unholy card, that could be interesting, right? But maybe that ends up being like too straightforwardly powerful with the sort of unholy synergies. But it just does feel like a an unholy card to me, and it's strange that it's not. Next up, Corpuscle. 2-cost Frost spell with a Frost rune. Deal 3 damage. Spend 3 corpses to return it to your hand at the end of the turn. So this is very like Frozen Touch. With rather than you have the it gets the whatever effect. I'm forgetting what that was called. When things died while it was in your hand. But this you can obviously bank it. It's not like that effect where you'd have to have it in your hand. This, like, if you have 30 corpses banked, you can just Corpuscle every single turn. So this is an interesting payoff for having corpses in a frost-ish deck. It's like a kind of a repeatable burn spell. It's not something you can use like Frozen Touch in terms of like being able to multicast it in a single turn to burn your opponent out. Much more flexible than the infuse cost, because again, you can sort of stack the corpses whenever rather than having to have this in your hand. But it is kind of like a, for old school Magic players, it's like a Hammer of Bogarden, right? Like it's a just repeatable burn spell. You can potentially use it every single turn. This, I think, probably pales in comparison in terms of the payoff you're getting for your corpses compared to the whatever the foam axe thing that you just keep getting durability every time you expend corpses with it. But it's another sort of way that you just directly can turn corpses into damage in that style of deck that can give you just repeated damage over the long term. So this certainly feels like it can be a very, very reasonable removal / long game damage spell sort of effect. Next up, we have Horizon's Edge. 4-cost location with 5 durability. It's weird that this particular image is so much bigger and coming off the screen, but deal 3 damage randomly split among all enemies. After a friendly minion dies, reopen this. So this is one of the mechanics in the new set, which is ways to reopen your locations. This being effectively like arcane missiles, right? But you can keep using the arcane missiles effect every time a friendly minion dies. This has no rune requirement either. So this is 15 damage on a card for 4 mana. So if you're playing this in, say, like an unholy deck with a bunch of small minions, maybe you're playing it alongside like crop rotation, things like that, this can just nuke your opponent, right? Like, this is a very, very powerful card to blow your opponent up, as long as you have like a bunch of small minions that you can get killed repeatedly. So this feels like a very, very powerful like finisher style card for a deck that's not just generating a lot of corpses, but generating a lot of like bodies on the board that it's able to trade off and get killed. And you use those minions, trade off, and get them killed by killing your opponent's minions, and then all this damage goes face. So this feels like a really, really strong card to me. And I wouldn't even be surprised if this like ends up getting toned down at some point with maybe a little bit less durability. Next up, we have Frostbitten Freebooter. With 3-cost 2/2 Undead Pirate, 1 Frost rune. With Death Metal, freeze 3 random enemies. Any that were already frozen take 5 damage instead. So this is an interesting card in combination with like the freeze lifesteal weapon. That feels like a very, very powerful way to like just get a bunch of damage on your opponent with this. If there's other like sort of freeze effects, like Might of Menethil, that's going to kill your opponent's minions. But this is obviously very good at killing your opponent's face if you freeze their face. There aren't really that many freeze your opponent's face things in Death Knight. They're much more about freezing opponent's minions. There's like the weapon and like Glacial Shard that I can think of that can easily freeze your opponent's face and potentially just get 5 damage off this guy's death rattle for it. But 5 damage plus this body plus potentially freezing their minions for 3 mana does feel like it has some potential there. Next up, we have Snow Shredder, another freeze focused synergy card. 4 cost 4/4 costs 1 if a character is frozen. So this does feel like it has some potential with the other things that are obviously caring about freeze synergies. No, it has potential. Oko has the potential. Just coming up to say hi. Hi, bud. So yeah, clearly some push toward building a like freeze Death Knight deck here. Between that sort of previous card and this one, could certainly see like a tempo freeze sort of burn style of deck going on with these. Next up, Ghoul's Knight, a 4 cost spell, summon 5/1/1 ghouls that attack random enemies. So notably, this is not like a crop rotation effect; they don't go away. But this alongside the like say arcane missiles location here, the Horizon's Edge, definitely feels like the sort of thing that can do a lot of damage, right? Like if your opponent has minions, this can get like kill some of their minions. Could also just be like 5 damage face for 4 if they have nothing in play, right? And then you still have a bunch of 1/1s. If you want corpses, a lot of corpse generation. So this just feels like a powerful card. It can be like basically opponent has an empty board, it fireballs them, right? It does 4 damage, or 5 damage rather, for 4 mana, and leaves you with a bunch of bodies they have to deal with. And those give you corpses, those can trigger things. So this feels like a powerful card that has a lot of potential in a number of different decks. Next up, we have Dreadhound Handler. 2 cost 2/2 Rush. Undead Pirate, both for potentially relevant minion types. With Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Dreadhound with Reborn. So if you're playing a deck that's looking for any kind of corpse generation, this is a 2 cost minion that can immediately remove an opponent's minion with Rush, and then give you another body that generates another body. So this is a very reasonable board control effect, as well as a very powerful corpse generator. So this just definitely feels like a very solid card that has the potential to fit into a number of different decks as long as they care about, undead. I assume the Dreadhound is undead as well. If they care about, board control / corpses. So just generally seems like a very solid role player style card. Next we have Slippery Slope, a double frost spell. Freeze a character, draw a card for each frozen character. So this, is clearly another card that has the potential alongside the frozen style things we were talking about. Again, I don't know that there's enough real payoffs for hey, do a bunch of stuff to frozen stuff. Because there really wasn't very much before that cared about stuff being frozen. Now there's like 3 cards in this set that do care about frozen things. This one, if you use this with like Might of Menethil, right? This alongside Might of Menethil has the potential to draw you a bunch of cards and freeze your opponent's face, and then maybe enable your 2/2 that death rattles to deal 5 to the frozen things. But yeah, there's definitely some potential here. This feels like the best of the payoffs. Like a 2 cost potential draw 3, 4 that already has an additional effect. Does seem pretty solid to me. So overall, Death Knight, I feel like Death Knight has some powerful cards. The ones that really stand out to me, Eliza Goreblade definitely seems quite strong. I'm going to move this slightly up so it's more centered with this. But yeah, this definitely feels like a pretty strong card that has a lot of potential. So does the Ghoul's Knight, especially in combination, right? If you have multiple Eliza Goreblade triggers, right? Say you manage to get that death rattle twice. So you just get it once, right? This is 10 damage for 4 mana. If everyone has no board, boom, blast you and have a bunch of 2/1s in play. Get Eliza twice, boom, 15 damage if you have nothing in play. So definitely feels like a very, very strong possible combination of things. Buttons, the tourist card, the other legendary, hard to say, right? Like I don't know what you're really looking to do with a spell school Death Knight deck in quite the same way. But yeah, and then there's just some solid role players. The Dreadhound Handler feels really good, and this guy, the Brittlebone Buccaneer, definitely feels like a very solid card to support any kind of death rattle or even just a undead type strategy with just a couple of death rattles. Even this alongside, like I said, the puppeteer is a super, super powerful card that can do a lot of work in that style of deck. So yeah, definitely some sweet stuff that I expect to see play, and looking forward to trying it. Demon Hunter. Right now, there's only really like aggro Demon Hunter that you tend to see in Standard. There's like the aggro with the Umpire's Grasp, even nerfed, still pretty good with Window Shopper, as well as like the 1/3 that gets plus attack based on your power. Some of them are still playing, the Naga Sharpshooter thing. But yeah, this a 6-cost 5/2 weapon doesn't lose durability when you control a minion with 5 or more attack. Um, mm, like obviously this can be a powerful effect. Just getting a sort of endless weapon swing here, but doesn't really necessarily feel super exciting to me. Like I feel like there's a lot of powerful Demon Hunter cards, right? Like a lot of like powerful like faster Demon Hunter cards in this. Demon Hunter doesn't like really feel like it has like a great like big minion theme. There are definitely some powerful big minion things, like some of the sort of big demon stuff, but that requires a lot of support, and this doesn't really feel like it survives to get you there. So I do sort of question. It is a way to have like a Demon Hunter deck have like a lot of long game power against control, especially if you can pretty readily get big dudes down. Notably, you can play this with the 1/3 I was discussing, that gets attack equal to your attack. So you can just have this on with a 1-drop, and that's fairly powerful. But it's hard for me to imagine a world where this is a great card that doesn't also already involve like Vipers, as being a common card, which end up making this a lot harder to use. Next up, Dangerous Cliffside, a 4-cost location with 3 durability. Summon 2 1/1 pirates with charge. After hero attacks, reopen this. So this is a pretty, if you have ways to buff the guys, this can be a pretty powerful location. It can very very easily get 4 1/1 chargers in one turn that you can kind of bank by playing this and then using it later. There have been Death Knight cards. Like Feast of Souls. I actually kind of forget if Feast of Souls is currently legal. I don't think it is. I think it's currently not in Standard. Definitely doesn't feel like a card that, without something uh, like Feast of Souls, is likely to be that good. Definitely needs support to make the 1/1s stronger. If there are ways to easily boost your small minion attack, it can certainly be strong. But otherwise, feels like you have a lot of better options available in Demon Hunter for aggression. Next up, Patches the Pilot. This one's cool. 1/1 for 1. Battlecry, summon 6 parachutes in your deck. Summon a 1/1 pirate with charge when drawn. This I think is a very cool card. Certainly less miserable than old Patches, which was just always in charge, came up every single game, got your opponent. But this is hey, if you want to draw Patches now instead of trying Patches be a terrible thing. Demon Hunter has a lot of powerful card draw effects. So this being just an incidental way you can play this and then just get a bunch of like extra dudes over the course of the game can be reasonably powerful. Again, I do feel like it's a bit weaker without ways to take advantage of having a bunch of small minions. So without stuff again like Feast of Souls, like ways to buff those small minions, it does feel a little bit less impressive than it otherwise might be. But does feel like you're getting a lot of long game pressure and value for a very low investment. Next up, we have Sigil of Skydiving. Again, lots of stuff. This is actually, I haven't really seen many of the Demon Hunter cards, so it's possible that we get through to some of these and I'm like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of ways to use these 1/1s. Because here's another way to make 1/1s. Start your next turn, summon 3 1/1 pirates with charge. Again, if we stumble across one of these cards going through this that is like, hey, your 1/1s are amazing, great. But this is just 2 mana for 3 bodies and potentially just 3 damage face the following turn, which, if there is support for these 1/1s, has the potential to be quite powerful. Skirting Death, Shadow Spell. Choose a minion. This turn, your hero steals 4 attack from it. Kind of mediocre. This feels like you need there to be a minion that has 4 attack for this to do anything. Yes, you can like get a bunch of attack. It does damage. Just this feels like it's way too conditional and doesn't do nearly enough, frankly. Paraglide. Remember Glide? This isn't it. 3 cost. Both players draw 3 cards. Outcast only you do. I know people are going to try to use this as like a mill card somehow because people love the idea of fatiguing their opponents. I do think that like against decks that are likely to have like a big hand, being able to overdraw your opponent is potentially pretty strong. Against like combo style decks, I do think people generally overvalue overdrawing their opponents. They're most of the time, unless your opponent is playing some form of like combo deck, it doesn't matter if they're missing a couple of cards because you could just imagine those in the bottom of the deck and they wouldn't have drawn them anyway. But it can be powerful in certain matchups. It can give you information, and obviously this has the utility of possibly just giving you 3 cards for 3 mana, which is a powerful effect to begin with. So I do think this card is probably worse than most people's initial impressions because they overvalue the overdraw, but still a pretty solid card. Arana Thrill Seeker, a Priest Tourist. Damage your hero takes on your turn is redirected to a random enemy. So there are some like self-damage priest cards in this expansion that this can synergize with. I think people are going to kind of look at that text box and freak out that it's basically like Warlock Quest. But obviously this is like a temporary effect that only matters while this is in play. It can be removed, unlike the Warlock Quest, which is permanent once it actually hits. You could use this with Fatigue, right? Like you could, play a deck that has the goal of drawing basically this entire deck, casting this, and drawing a bunch of cards. Because Demon Hunter is very, very good at drawing a bunch of cards, right? So that I think is probably like the strongest effect of this much of the time. But that feels like it's gonna need to be like very, very dedicated deck to super, super heavy card draw. And yeah, you obviously can have like any kind of like multi-attack cards. Multi-strike is not in standard. Being able to obviously hit like a giant minion can happen too. But I feel like if you're gonna build this as a strategy, right? Like you want things that are gonna fundamentally guarantee you self-damage, and it isn't like your opponent having a giant minion. So, but yeah, as far as the actual priest tourist thing, again, there's like the Mind Blast Both of Us card. Again, I don't really have like an encyclopedic knowledge of all the cards that have been revealed in this because I haven't been paying enough attention. So it's harder for me to evaluate like the specifics of what this means for each of the various tourist classes. But yeah, so notably, priests have access, or rather, demon hunters have access to priests. Priests don't have access to demon hunter. It's not like a just multi-class thing. It's kind of a clockwise sort of circle thing. So yeah, next up, all-terrain Void Hound. Whenever this attacks, give your hero +5 attack. It is a 7-cost 5/8 demon. I mean, this is a cool card for that weapon because it has an infinite durability and basically attacks for 10. But this is also a 7-cost 5/8 that does nothing when you play it. So I think this card is probably just bad unless you use this with like All Fel Breaks Loose or whatever the 0-cost thing, Felon Flame, right? This with Felon Flame is pretty powerful because if you can rush this and immediately get like the 5 attack, that can be pretty valuable. But without rush, without any way to take advantage of this immediately, this just feels like a very weak card. Next up, Adrenaline Fiend. Here we go. Here's a payoff for all the 1/1 charge guys. After friendly pirate attacks, give your hero +1 attack this turn. So yeah, this is basically what you end up wanting to use the location with, the patches with, the sigil with. This is your payoff of, hey, you get a bunch of extra damage from each of these pirates attacking. Is this enough of a payoff? I don't know about making these good, but it feels like it may be a little bit too unreliable without like more things to actually have for the pirates. But obviously that is the intended payoff card for having a bunch of things that are making 1/1s with charge. And lastly, Cliff Dive. Summon 2 minions from your deck, give them rush, they go back at the end of the turn. So, well, we found a way to give the all-terrain Voidhound rush. So it is not a just dopey card. It can be used with Cliff Dive. This is basically this is Big Demon, right? This is the Big Demon payoff type card that they have right now. So this is like, hey, you play big stuff. Maybe they have attack triggers. Maybe they have death rattles. Maybe they, have maybe like Illidari Inquisitor, right? Like this feels like there's a lot of things you could possibly use this with. Um, just big things probably isn't that good because if it's just big things, you're like, okay, I play this. If you don't have things for me to like trade my big things into, it's not that big a deal. But yeah, like powerful like death rattle, powerful like attack triggers. Again, like Illidari Inquisitor slash this dude slash like I'm trying to think of other stuff. There's like it's actually around. There's the 9/9 guy, right? That guy's still around. That like when he takes damage, your opponent takes it back. Yeah, you could have this with like Yogg in your deck. You could have this with like the Titan in your deck. The Titan obviously gaining rush isn't a big deal, but you could use its effect and get like life steal off of things and rush down some other things, get discount from your other things. So yeah, this definitely wants to be used with specific attack triggers, specific end of the battlefield triggers. Here I am talking magic, not battle cries obviously, but effects that you can use that don't matter if it attacks are also pretty good. So overall, I think there's some really interesting Demon Hunter stuff. I'm unconvinced by the like pirate package stuff. It feels like it may not be good enough to compete with some of the other aggressive things that Demon Hunter is already doing. There's not like, it's not like there's like Blade Dance or anything that really gives you a payoff for having like a high attack to make this more than just like, hey, this is just another way to get damage. But yeah, overall, I feel like this is less impressive than some of the other things. I do think the big demon stuff is interesting, or at least the big guy stuff is interesting. We could try like this cliff dive with like literally you could imagine just having Illidari Inquisitor in your deck, like 2 Illidari Inquisitors, so you can always potentially hit them with this. You need ways to like shuffle them back into your deck otherwise, and I can't really think that there's those that currently exist. There was the 0 cost gain attack. So probably not worth trying to just do that and like have a weapon up and then just smash them. But it is an option. But anyway, overall, Demon Hunter, some neat stuff. I'm not blown away by any of it, but I certainly think that there is some potential there. Next up, we have Druid. Our first Druid card is Hiking Trail. Also, worth noting, I believe we are getting Splish Splash Whelp back, right? Splish Splash Whelp was banned temporarily due to the crazy performance of Druid prior to the release of the set. Splish Splash Whelp was banned and is now returning with a change. Splish Splash Whelp is going to be a 3-mana 3/2 with the same ability rather than a 2-mana 1/1, which I think it's kind of funny. Now it's just like, no, Druid really can't get Wild Growth. They can get 3-mana Wild Growth, but they cannot get Wild Growth. But worth noting, just while we're looking at Druid cards, there's not the same ability to ramp as quickly. There is still the ability to ramp, but it requires a little bit more mana to do it. But Hiking Trail, new location. Discover a taunt minion after you gain armor. Reopen this. There's so many bad taunt minions nowadays. But yeah, I think that this is a fine card, but fine cards really aren't good enough in Druid, right? Like Druid just has such powerful cards as we've seen that like this incremental value card when you have stuff like Eoner and Marin and Raystraza and all these things like, hey, you can discover a taunt minion even if you can get 3 of them for 1 card pretty easily and you don't even have to wait that many turns because it has a pretty easy reopen. Just doesn't seem that good to me. So I'd be pretty surprised if Hiking Trails saw any meaningful play. Next up, we have Hydration Station. Obviously, the idea of, hey, play this with your big taunt minions that you discover. You don't need to discover them. You can just play them, right? I don't really feel like, like what are the big taunt minions that you might want? There's obviously Fi, which is powerful. But this is a very expensive card, right? This is an 8 cost card. And this is, it is worth noting the various tourist things. Warrior does have Taurus into Druid. You could potentially play a Taunt Warrior deck with this. This can get back a Ziliax, right? Ziliax is probably the best thing to Hydration Station. And maybe you play like Unkiliax, right? Like, and you get back 2 of them because you have your 2 10-cost Ziliaxes are the most powerful things. So definitely some possible power here. It is worth noting that we do live in a world with Yogg and Reno, which makes playing a deck that is built around resurrecting big minions a dangerous thing to rely on, because there's always the possibility they get stolen or poofed. So I'm a little bit skeptical of just how good this card can be. Next up, we have Cruise Captain Laura. 7 cost, 4/5 pirate, battlecry, summon 2 random locations. I mean, there are some expensive, powerful locations in this set, but I just feel like 7 cost minion getting this, like a couple locations is just like it's such a huge investment for a random effect that you're not guaranteed is going to have any sort of meaningful benefit to you. So maybe there's some sort of like location, like theme, I don't know, but it just does not feel like it's likely to be good enough to really justify actually putting into your deck from a power level standpoint. If you do get like, double up on a double up on what's it, Prison of Yogg-Saron or something, sure, but this just feels like it's too little for too much and not nearly reliable enough. Next up, we have Dozing Dragon. This is me from the hours of around 10 or 11 until 6 a.m. Dormant for 2 turns. That's a turn is about 4 hours. While dormant, summon a 3/5 dragon with taunt at the end of your turn. I mean, this is fine. The immediate impact you're getting from it is, you're spending 5 mana for a 3/5 taunt, right? And then you get another 3/5 taunt the next turn. It's fine. But like, there are so many powerful cards in Druid again, and so many powerful tempo cards, and so many powerful value cards, that this being like, here is some incremental value, just doesn't feel like it's good enough, right? It feels like you're getting 0 mana 3/4s when you're playing a dragon deck in Druid. So this just feels like it's not quite good enough to justify including it over a lot of the other options that exist. Next up, Bouldering Buddy. A 7 cost 6/7 rush taunt, costs 1 if you have at least 10 mana crystals. Fine. There are good a lot of good ramp effects. Anything that is cost reduction like this is pretty powerful, right? Like anything that allows you in the later stages of the game to be able to just put a ton of stats into play can have some value. That said, once you have ramped to 10, the cost reduction is that much less relevant. And this isn't like the beetle, right? That can actually just like charge and kill your opponent. Which is another one of the like, hey, you care about having lots of mana minions. So this is I think fine but not amazing, and I think, as I've said before, you need to be pretty amazing to find your home in Druid decks these days. That said, the ability to go over 10 mana does exist, both with Audio Amplifier and with a new card, which I'm just going to go over here right now. New Heights. Increase your maximum mana by 3 and gain an empty mana crystal. This is new wild growth that is interesting. You can actually go to 16 with these, because each of them does matter. If you have ways to discover more of them, you can go to 19. You can go to 22. If you play Audio Amplifier first and then play this, you go to 14. This we're not back to like Guff levels of just playing one card and going to 20. Also, Guff obviously being a ramp spell that also drew you cards and continue to ramp you was crazy. This is a singular spell that does it once, and going above 10 is powerful, but going to 13 is very different than going to 20. I do think this will be a powerful card that does see play. It enables a ton of new play patterns that are available by having more than 10 mana in a turn, and be able to reset your mana crystals with Eoner when you have a maximum of say 16. Is clearly making that very powerful card even that much more powerful. Next up, Tortolan Traveler, a 3-cost 1/5 taunt with Death Turtle. Draw another taunt minion, reduces cost by 2. Um, this could very much wants us to be a taunt deck. Clearly, I feel like this is potentially a strong card for early game defense that can draw you a Ziliax that can try and bridge to your reanimate guy, reanimate spell. But certainly, I think certainly a powerful card against aggressive decks. And again, I do think it's a little bit unfortunate that we're mostly going to see this with Ziliax, because Ziliax is so nutty, and especially with the Reborn Ziliax, which works so well with Rehydration Station. But yeah, I do think that there is at least this, I think, is actually probably the more important of all these cards for a Taunt Druid deck being viable, because it is giving you a meaningful early game play that also gives you the ability to sort of accelerate into your more powerful effects later on. Next up, Mista Vista, 5-cost 5/5, Mage Tourist with Battlecry. In 3 turns, replay every spell you've cast between now and then. And this is a wildly interesting card, right? Oops. Wildly interesting. I think that both Mage Tourist and Druid, right? Like, what are you possibly interested in Mage Touristing? You can get the legendary spell for your Mage Touristing, which is hilarious, right? Recast all of your big spells that you've cast. I guess you can't. Never mind. It has to be Perils in Paradise. My brain keeps not processing that it has to be from this set, which again I get from a balance perspective, but it's a little bit sad from a deck building perspective of hey, what are the cool things it can do? And I haven't looked at the mage cards yet, so I don't know what you can do with this. So, but even just the effect, in 3 turns replay every spell you've cast between now and then. There's a lot of powerful spells you can cast, like say this one, Sleep Under the Stars. 7-cost arcane spell, choose thrice, draw 2 cards, gain 5 armor, refresh 3 mana crystals. So yeah, this can be just, a 7-cost, draw 6 cards, gain 15 armor, or gain 2 mana. Probably not going to use that. But the refresh mana crystals part of this is so strange to me, right? It's really strange to me. Because it's why is that on a choose thing? I get it does offer some optionality, but it just feels like such a strange thing of okay, I'm going to play this, and it's going to be a 4-cost, gain 10 armor. It's going to be a 4-cost, draw 4 cards. I assume you can choose the same mode more than once, or else it would always just be a 4-cost, draw 2, gain 5, right? So you clearly can choose the same effect more than once. But yeah, a lot of optionality here. Obviously, you do have to get to 7 before you can use it. But yeah, definitely an interesting card that I do think is likely to see play, because it does have very, very powerful options. And lastly, we have Trail Mix. Gain 2 mana crystals next turn only. So this is interesting. It's old school Innervate, but it's an investment, right? You say, hey, I am going to Innervate next turn. Or Underload. You get 2 extra mana crystals. But yeah, I think that this is certainly a card that people are going to experiment with. Certainly way worse than an Innervate was, because you can't just pop off with it immediately. You have to invest in it in advance. And it does give your opponent some amount of ability to sort of prepare for you trying to do a very powerful thing. But even just being able to play this and then play as an early, Eoner, Raystraza, Giant Thing, Marin, whatever, is, I think, quite strong. So yeah, I do think this is likely to see play. People will at least experiment with it, because people love their big, burst effects ahead of time. Your Underload right there. Underload Innervate. I do think the most interesting cards to me in Druid, I think that this New Heights, certainly a powerful card, certainly one that is going to see play and is going to open up new sort of deck builds because of the increased mana available. I also think that this card, the Tortolan Traveler, is a very interesting one. You don't even necessarily have to play Taunt Druid for this to be good, right? If you're playing just a deck that, if there are aggressive decks and you're playing Druid and you have Ziliax Fi in your deck, right? You can play this, because just drawing your Ziliax or Fi and reducing the cost by 2 is a powerful effect. So yeah, I definitely think these are certainly pretty interesting. Druid is not without a lot of really powerful cards already. So I don't know that that's necessarily you know going to change things too much because they have lots and lots of powerful things they can be already doing. But certainly some cool new options available.